Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. I'm Fina, and today I'm going to be doing a book review of Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. So this review will be divided into a spoiler-free section and a spoiler section. The spoiler-free section will be first, and then you can click away from the video when I get to the spoiler section if you haven't read this book yet and don't want any spoilers about it. So without further ado, let's just get into it. So Warbreaker follows two sisters named Ciri and Ravenna who live in the country of Idris, which is a small country bordering on a very powerful country called Halandren. And these two sisters are members of the royal family who used to rule Halandren but were exiled during a great war. Ravenna has been betrothed to the god king of Halandren her entire life, but when the time comes for her to go and be married to the god king, circumstances make it so that her sister Ciri has to go instead. This book centers a lot on politics and the politics of the Halandren court, which is made up of gods, and these gods are people who have died and have come back from the dead. So I'm going to start by talking about the world building in this book. I really loved the concept of awakening. I think that it was a really interesting magic system. Awakening is basically the idea that people can use this force inside of them called breath to animate inanimate objects. And that was just really fascinating, and I think that the way that it was used in the book was really interesting. Brandon Sanderson's characters always use the magic system that he creates in really interesting ways. It feels really natural for the story, and it feels realistic for the story because it's such an ingrained part of the world, and I really did appreciate that. I also really loved the complex politics of this world. I think that it was just so interesting to read about, and this book is not a very action-packed book. It tends to focus more on the politics, but the politics were just so interesting to me that I was engaged 100%. I thought that it was excellent. It's a slower moving story, obviously, because it doesn't focus so much on action a lot of the time, but it was really, really interesting to me. And I do tend to really like political fantasy when it's done well, and I think that that was definitely the case with this book. One aspect of the magic system that kind of bothered me was that members of the royal family of Idris could change the color of their hair based on their emotions. I had no problem with that concept, but it was called the royal locks. Every time someone said the royal locks on page, it just felt kind of ridiculous to me. I feel like it could have been called something different and it would have had a better impact because every time I saw it, it was just kind of cringe-worthy. And obviously this isn't a huge thing, it wasn't a huge plot point in the book, but when it did come up, when people talked about it, when characters were discussing it, it was just sort of funny as opposed to being serious, and it kind of took away from some of the more serious scenes because of that. So that's one thing that I do think could have been done better. I just feel like the names maybe could have been changed, but that's a really small thing, and it didn't bother me enough that it really lowered my enjoyment of the book. It's just something that I noticed and I thought I should point out in my review. The next thing that I want to talk about is characterization. So I'm just going to briefly go through all of the major characters. I'm not going to go into too much detail because some of it could be spoilers, but I will be very brief and keep this as short as possible. So I'm going to start with Ciri. I really, really loved Ciri right away. I was just very invested in her storyline. I was really attached to her very, very quickly. I liked her spunk. I liked that she didn't just let things happen to her. She was always trying to act and figure out things and does what she can with the freedom that she has. She's strong without being flawless. She's a bit naive, but she tries really, really hard, and she is really intelligent. And I did like that a lot about her. She just felt like a really real person, and I immediately liked her. It didn't take me long to like Ciri at all. When she first came in, I thought that she might be annoying. Her first chapter, I was like, oh, is this how it's gonna go? Is this how it's gonna be for her? But I ended up really connecting with her, and I was rooting for her throughout the entire book. Vivenna took me a little bit longer to warm up to, but I ended up really appreciating her character arc. I think that it was really well done. I liked that her character arc also focused on judgmentalism in religion, and I think that it was addressed really, really well. There's one sentence in the book that I actually marked because I just thought that it was such an amazing sentence. She saw now that when her faith had become about clothing instead of people, it had taken a wrong turn. And I just really, really love this because it says so much about judgmentalism in religion. For me, I'm a Christian, and I hate it when I see people judging other people and not loving them. We're supposed to love all people. We're not supposed to judge them. Judging is God's job. And I really did appreciate this book for that, especially for that sentence, because it really hit home with me, because I just really believe that very, very strongly, that we should be focusing on loving other people and not judging them. Another main character in this book is Vasher, and he ended up growing on me. I didn't start at the book liking him, but I ended up rooting for him even when I didn't think that I maybe should be rooting for him. It was really interesting how chaotic he was. I never really knew what he was going to do next. His points of view were always very unpredictable because I never knew what he was planning or what he was going to do next, because he was just so chaotic and unpredictable, and I thought that that was really interesting about his chapters. And for most of the book, it's also kind of ambiguous as to whose side is he on. Like, what is he trying to accomplish here? We have no idea, and that was also really interesting to me. I also really loved Lightsong. I don't know how anyone could read this book and not like Lightsong, but I really loved Lightsong. His sense of humor was amazing, and I was laughing a few times while I was reading his chapters because I just found some of his internal dialogue and some of his dialogue just so funny. I also liked his internal struggle. He is a character in this world who is considered a god, and he struggles with whether or not he actually is. He doesn't believe that he is divine, and I thought that that was a very interesting character struggle for him. He was just awesome. I don't know how anyone could read this book and dislike him, because he just had such a likable personality, and I really liked his chapters as well. A priest who is the head priest for Lightsong, and I loved him. I thought he was awesome. And there are a few other characters that I did like, or I liked at one point and then I didn't, and I will be talking about that more in the spoiler section because I can't really get into them here without being spoilery. I just feel like Brandon Sanderson usually does such a great job developing his characters, especially in his Cosmere books. Now I'm going to talk briefly about the plot. I'm not going to get into this too much because there isn't really much to say. The plot moves fairly slowly because of its political nature. It's focused very heavily on politics as opposed to action. But I think that it did it well. I think it did the politics really well. Like I said in the world building section, I think the politics were super interesting, and so I was engaged all the way through. It did take me a while to get through the first half of the book, but after that I was just so interested in reading more, and I think that it's well worth getting through the slower section near the beginning because it picks up so well, and I think that it ended up turning out so amazing. One thing that did bother me a little bit about the plot was how quickly the resolution happened. It could have happened a little bit slower. The pacing was just a little bit fast towards the end when everything was getting tied up, but overall, I think that it did an excellent job at plot, even though it was a little bit slow. I think that this story didn't need to be faster. It's a political story, and so it is going to be slower than something that's focused more on action. But I think that it's well worth the read, especially if you're interested in political fantasy, because I think that this is a fantastic example of it. So now I'm going to be talking about spoilers. So if you haven't read this book and want to read it, or you don't want spoilers about this book before you read it, please click away now. There will be major spoilers for this book in the next section. First, I want to talk about how shocked I was when it turned out that Denth was evil. That plot twist threw me a curveball. I did not see that coming, and it just came out of nowhere and hit me in the face, and I was just reeling. I was like, what? What? Because up to this point, I had loved Denth. I thought that he was awesome. And I'd actually written that down in my review notes. As I was reading this book, I was taking notes for my review, and I wrote down that I really liked Denth. I don't like Denth anymore. When I read this, it just blew my mind. I think that it was the best plot twist in the whole book. It just, whoa, like, that just was not expected at all. But then when you look back, you can see the foreshadowing all the way through, and I felt so betrayed. I felt so betrayed. And I mean, props to Brandon Sanderson, because it really helped give the scene extra emotional weight, because Vivenna was feeling betrayed and I was feeling betrayed, and like, it worked so well. But wow, it was just a crazy, crazy plot twist that I did not see coming at all. Another thing that I really liked about this book was Susebron and Ciri's relationship. At first, I didn't like Susebron, and then there was a twist, and I ended up really, really liking him, and I loved his and Ciri's relationship. I think it could have been done very badly. Like, it had the potential to be done very, very badly, but Brandon Sanderson managed to handle it so expertly, and I shipped them. I thought that they were an amazing couple, and I was 100% on board with their romance. I did really like that aspect as well. Another thing that just completely threw me a curve was Blushweaver's death. I did not expect that to happen. It was just so sudden. It just shocked me, and I actually was kind of sad too, because I'd ended up like getting attached to her as well, and then she died, and I was just sitting there like, what? Why would you do that? One thing that I wish had gotten a little bit more build up was Bluefinger's betrayal, and that whole plot line that it wasn't actually the Halandran priests who were trying to start the war with Idris. I wish that had gotten a little bit more foreshadowing, and maybe it did and I just wasn't paying attention, but I feel like it could have gotten a little bit more build up. I did think that it was an interesting twist, but I feel like it could have been built up more and made even more impactful. I did think that it was an interesting twist, but more build up could have made it even better, is what I'm driving at. I will talk a little bit more about the pacing in the last section now, because I couldn't really get into too much detail in the spoiler-free section because I didn't want to accidentally reveal something. So I just feel like the way that everything ended up resolving just happened so quickly. One thing that I feel like didn't get enough build up in this last section was Lightsong's healing of Susebron. I definitely think that it was plausible, but I had never considered, and the narrative had never planted the idea that the returned could heal other returned, and so it kind of came out of the left field. Like, I didn't really see it coming, and not necessarily in a good way like some of the other twists in this book. I just feel like it could have used a little bit more build up again. And then just everything that happened afterwards with the lifeless army being sent out toward Idris, and how the statues ended up being Khaled's phantoms and going after them to stop them just happened so quickly, and the reveal happened so quickly that I feel like it lessened its impact. Again, these things weren't things that really impacted my enjoyment of the book overall. I ended up giving this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. I think that it's an excellent book. I just feel like those things could have been developed more and made it even better and even more impactful. So that is my review of Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. Have you read this book? And if so, what did you think of it? Or are you planning on reading this book? Please let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more of my content. I post videos every Monday and Friday. I will see you guys again very soon. Bye.